So good afternoon and welcome to the latest West London Economic Prosperity Board. As has been the case over the last 18 months, we have met at extremely challenging times economically, both for our sub-region and most importantly for thousands of people across the sub-region. And this body is charged with lessening that pain and indeed increasing prosperity. And that's what we're going to do today. We have a busy agenda, which I will run through in a minute. But to begin with, I would like to deal with the apologies. And I've had two apologies so far from Councillor Steve Curran from Hounslow and from Councillor Peter Mason from Ealing, both of them the leaders of their respective boroughs. Okay, are there any more apologies, anybody?
Just to say, Councillor Cowan, that Councillor Bassam is here for Councillor Peter Mason, Ealing.
Brilliant. Hi and welcome. And Graham, I can see your little yellow hand gone straight up there.
My little yellow hand. So sorry, Steve. I have an urgent meeting with the health service at 3:30. Right. So if I might have to leave at that time.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me know. All right. Let's move swiftly on then to minutes of the previous meeting. There are no specific action points to cover unless anyone seeks to raise them. Anyone would like to talk about the minutes?
No.
Okay, well, the report on item number 3 today picks up on the next steps of various elements of the economic recovery activity, which we did discuss at the last meeting. So I think we should just note that and move precisely on to item number 3, which I will hand over to you, David, to do a brief introduction.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cowan. So the paper was circulated prior to the meeting, and I'm just proposing that I go through 4 or 5 slides just to guide us through the paper and then take us to the recommendation. So if you can bear with me while I load up this presentation. I think this is the one. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay. So in terms of an overview, and as I said, this is covered in detail in the paper, but I'm going to give a bit of an update on the Oxford economics work. We've had a new report from them. I'm going to talk about the progress that we've made on the Build and Recover plan, and then there's a proposal for how we can refocus our work that we've set out, the priorities that we set out in the Build and Recover plan, and then, as I said, it's the recommendations which are in the paper, which leaders have been asked to consider and agree. In terms of what Oxford Economics are telling us, their report was done at 3 levels. It was in fact 4 levels. It was looking at the UK, looking at London, looking at the West London Alliance area, and then at a borough level. So what I'm covering here is the UK and London, and then the WA level. So UK and London, as you can see there, London. In terms of GVA in 2020, a very steep decline, but slightly lower than what it was nationally. It's showing that London is in terms of its GVA was 6th place as in terms of it being a region. And a point that's just been made there is that people have been impacted differently. So some people have been able to work from home. And that's had implications for many of our residents who live in our boroughs and in normal times may have worked in the central activity zone, but there have been many of our residents who have become unemployed or are on furlough. The next slide gives a picture of what's happening in West London. As you can see there, West London's been impacted more severely than the rest of London and the rest of UK. The GVA dropped by 10.7%. That's meant that around about 8.1 billion has been taken off of our GVA compared to the pre-pandemic. That's wiped out all the growth since 2013. We've got an extra 80,000 people have become unemployed, and we've got around about 180,000 people on furlough. Obviously, Heathrow has been a major factor, but as I said as well, many of our residents have lost jobs in the essential activity zone as well. Quite a stark figure, which kind of gives you the scale of the impact at Heathrow. 60 million fewer passengers came through Heathrow in 2020 compared to 2019 when there were 80 million, and 10 million and of those 20 million that did come through Heathrow were in January and February. So in effect, there's, if you think of the economy, West London economy as a large pond, a big boulder has been thrown in. It's impacted the direct jobs, but also there's a big ripple effect as well. Oxford Economics are saying that the jobs, we can expect that jobs will get back to the level they were at before in 2023, and the economy will get back to the level it was at before in 2022. But what that hides is the fact that many of the people who have become unemployed, if we don't do anything to help, if they're not given the right support, there's a risk that they could become less competitive in the labour market when it does bounce back. So a lot of our effort is focused on what support we can give to them. And this slide really just sort of says what's changed from the first report that Oxford Economics did to the report that they produced for us in April. So some of these, I mean, I guess we knew it was going to be bad in West London. That's been confirmed, and there are some things which have gone up slightly, something which have gone down, but I think generally speaking, the position we were in when we had the first report, i.e. knowing that we've been heavily impacted in West London, more so than the rest of London, the rest of the UK, is still the case. So this slide just really sets out what we've been doing over the last 8 or so months. With a lot, again, this is set out in the paper, but we've been doing a lot of work around employment support. We've been using the government funding, which was given to us for the job entry targeted support, which is for people who've been unemployed for 3 months or more. Obviously, a lot of those people are people who've been impacted by COVID, by the economic impacts of COVID. I won't go through all the numbers there because I think you can all see them. But one of the things that we've managed to do is link to the NHS system across West London, and we managed to get many unemployed people into jobs in the mass vaccination centres, and we're looking at how we can build on that to get residents into NHS jobs. There are every year there are lots of entry-level jobs which the NHS find really difficult to fill. So there's a real opportunity there for us to get our residents into those jobs on a more permanent basis. We're looking at how we can match up what help FE colleges to match up what they're offering so that it fits better with what industry is looking for. And to do that, we've developed an online tool which has been adopted across West London, and we're looking at how that can be used more widely across London. And we're also looking at we're also acknowledging the fact that the skills system and the employment system is quite complex, and if you turn up and try to navigate it, particularly if you've never been unemployed before, it can be quite difficult. So we're looking at how across the 7 West London Alliance boroughs and working with FE colleges and with business, we can have what we're calling a no wrong door approach. And again, this is something we're looking to share with London. And then also we're linking into the work that GLA are doing on skills academies. So they're looking at bringing forward skills academies around net zero, around health and care, and around digital and creative industries. And we're looking at how we can make sure that offer plays out in West London. The next 3 slides are around the work that we're doing on net zero. So again, using money we secured from central government, we've been doing some retrofitting, looking at how we can improve the way we do procurement to drive low carbon, and are also looking to develop an emissions measuring framework which we can apply across the 7 boroughs. The thing that's not on here is the task force, which Councillor Cowan also chairs as well. And that's been really key in making sure that we're getting buy-in from stakeholders to make sure that we've got their support and that what we're doing is informed by their knowledge as well. So the refocused build and recover priorities are on this slide. They're in the paper as well. The first three, skills and employment, growth sectors and innovation districts, and infrastructure, West London Orbital, they're also the areas where we feel we need to develop an influencing strategy. So that's making sure West London has a distinct voice as part of the London narrative, and working with large businesses and also, you know, some of the smaller businesses across West London, and with organisations like West London Business, with the colleges, with the task force, to really make the case for what we need in West London over and above what's been offered nationally. We're conscious that, you know, there are things like Kickstart, the Skills for Life offer, and we want to understand what the take up of that is in West London, and we want to make sure that we're filling gaps where they're not being met by schemes, such as some of those national schemes. The focus on reducing inequality and net zero carbon emissions, that's something we really want to strengthen. And then there are the town centres and entrepreneurships and micro businesses and housing. Those were the other three themes that were in the original Build and Recover plan. They're still important, but a lot of that work is being done at the borough level, and it's about how we can sort of share best practice and support that work at the sub-regional level. So finally, the recommendations. So it's basically to note and comment on, leaders have been asked to note and comment on the actual and forecast economic impact of the pandemic on West London, consider and agree the refocused priorities, and then note work underway to make sure West London's voice is being heard as part of the London narrative, and also through the task force and working with, and the plans that we've got to bring more business into that as well.
Okay, great. Well, a lot there. So someone's got that. David, I think you got your microphone still on. Can we? I'm sure there's lots of questions. Who has a question or a comment on any of this? Who can see ways? I mean, it's very broad brushstroke, I guess, necessarily for a presentation like this. But there's a lot of detail underneath it. Who would like to drill into some of that detail or raise some points of particular relevance to their boroughs and flag up some challenges that we need to be focused on? So please put your hand up. I can see one hand's gone up. It's Tony. No, it's not. It's Mohammed. Okay. Sorry, I've got Daniel Thomas first. So Daniel.
Thank you, Stephen. So it was more on the employment front, and certainly thinking of retail, and it's been reported certainly in the news that there are retail and hospitality. There are firms looking for people. There are jobs to you know, on offer, but they're struggling to find people. And I'm wondering if perhaps some of our EU citizens on furlough or unemployed have you know, gone back to their home countries and you know, are yet to come back. Have you got any sort of insights on that side of thing? Because whilst I do appreciate, you know, there is unemployment out there, there are jobs available, and it's really important that we sort of signpost, number one, that we get the jobs filled, but secondly, if we do have a shortage in any particular area, that we try and get the people back who've left.
That's a good point. If it's, I mean, certainly on the NHS, I know there's jobs there. You're making a point about retail. I presume you're also focused on Brent Cross, I guess. Westfield.
Well, it's more the smaller. I mean, Brent Cross, we don't have actually that many. I mean, we've got a lot of shops, obviously, but we don't have many hospitality restaurants there. There are a few, but throughout the borough, I mean, most shopping parades and town centres have independent cafes, restaurants, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then you've got your slightly bigger chain stores. And now I was just very interested to see. This is obviously moving fast. We're opening up now, and the picture could change over the summer, but what I'm saying is it's not all doom and gloom. There are jobs out there, and people are saying that they're struggling to fill them. So there's a bit of a contrasting story there.
Okay, well that is the quintessential session. How can we have jobs available and yet worry about the possibility of people in long-term unemployment? David, how do you fill that gap? You're on mute.
I should have got used to this by now, shouldn't I? Through the Job Entry Targeted Support Scheme, we have got organisations who are out there speaking to employers. So I don't think I haven't got any direct intelligence on that as to. I mean, all I can say is that there may be a kind of an issue about, you know, whether residents are willing to travel into the central activity zone area, and maybe that's prohibitive. So there may be a shift that needs to happen, because I think the central activity area is now starting to open up again. But I think I can see others wanting to come in who may have particular insights on this. So please do shout, and I'm really interested in ways we could actually get some better insights on that. So.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to take other people coming in on this issue before I move on to Mohammed, who I think is sort of a separate issue. Is that what you want to come in on, David?
Yes, really, just to come back on Councillor Thomas's point on hospitality specifically. I think what we seem to be seeing anecdotally is that it is that sector that appears to be suffering skill shortages and difficulties in recruiting. One possible way we could deal with that at the sub-regional level is through the sector skills academy approach that David mentioned. The GLA and its funding call that will be going live later in June, possibly early July, has expanded it to hospitality. So it could well be that we can work with FE, and largely FE really, rather than HE in West London, to look at short, sharp interventions on hospitality specifically.
Yeah.
Thank you, because those sorts of jobs, it could be a stopgap for someone whilst they, perhaps whilst other sectors take longer to open up. So anyway, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. It's actually quite interesting with the main point that we talk about, because it's very easy for us to talk very high level about these new schemes and new funding coming in. But actually, if you've been made unemployed from Heathrow as a baggage handler and you're looking to get a job possibly in a restaurant on a similar salary, then how do we make sure the training's there, the jobs are there, and you're quickly out of one job into another? And that's the practicality on the ground, really, we've got to be focused on, which is, I know, what David are very much focused on. Andrew, were you coming in on this point?
Yes, just very briefly to pick up on Councillor Thomas's reflection. I mean, I've seen the same articles reported in the media. What's being reflected back to me by local employers is not as acute as has been described in the sort of national media, and it does seem to be a bit patchy. I mean, some retailers seem to be having no difficulty at all, others finding it a bit harder.
Yeah. Okay. And Batten, are you coming in on this point? No. All right. I do know when I went around and visited Westfield recently, which is the biggest shopping mall in Europe, in Shepherd's Bush, and they do seem to have an awful lot of vacancies in their shop frontages. There's a lot of empty shop frontages, and so it is something that there was already challenges there from the internet before this hit. So there is something in how we support those businesses to evolve. Okay. In that case, I'll move on to Mohammed, who's been waiting patiently.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think we need to acknowledge the report. It's pretty comprehensive, and the breakdown towards the end of the individual boroughs and sort of just drilling down into the different elements is helpful. I think we do need to sort of have a focus on supporting people to get into different types of employment if they have lost their jobs, and also when the furlough scheme sort of comes to an end as well. It's a bit of a worrying point for myself, right? And just making sure, right, that we have the systems, the processes, the structures in place that enable the people to have a transition actually from what they were possibly doing beforehand to possibly some of the new sort of opportunities that we have going forward. And I think the aviation bit, right, is I think is going to be quite critical for places like Park Royal, considering there's a lot of support provided from Park Royal to the aviation industry, the airlines, right, for food and everything else, right, that's provided there, right? And if that doesn't take off, right, and then the issue about the hospitality sort of worries me as well, because if we still have the issues around the pandemic and the different types of variants and the conflicting advice about whether we can go on holiday or not go on holiday, whether we have to quarantine or not, and everything else, and right, and the extortionate cost of those hotels will virtually putting people in prison. And actually, because I know some people who work in some of those hotels around Hounslow and around Heathrow. And it's what we're actually doing. I mean, it's not setting a good message about the experience that people could have in coming over to Britain as well, right? So I think we might be shooting ourselves in the foot going forward, right? But I welcome the report, and I just and like I said, places like Park Royal, the OPDC, and all that kind of stuff, right, do have another role and opportunity to factor into this as well. Leave it there.
Okay. Anyone want to add into what Mohammed said? In which case, thank you for that, Mohammed. I'll move on to you, Bassam.
Thank you, Chair, and first of all, apologies from Councillor Mason, who will, absolutely appreciates the importance of this meeting and definitely wants to make sure that he's here, as you'll appreciate as a new leader. Lots of things that he's juggling this particular week, and just taking quickly Mohammed's point there about Hounslow, and hopefully the recent guidance back and forth from the government hasn't meant that's the reason why Steve Cowan isn't here today, but we'll put that to one side for a second. So look, I think the key thing here is about we need to bring jobs back to West London. We know there's going to be a realignment of jobs from the central London area, and clearly we want to make sure that we maximise that for residents here in West London. One thing I really wanted to focus on was, as we'll know, there's been a huge unequal impact to the economic fallout across the country, but from the studies that Volterra have done, and through the knowledge that we know in our own boroughs, there's been a significant inequality of the impact of this economic fallout on different groups of people across West London. And so it's right to focus on the green recovery and also young people, which is also referred to. And of course, the aviation industry, Mohammed's talked about Park Royal. Clearly, there's a huge impact on Southall as well within our borough. But we also need to ensure that however we target the efforts that we put in for that economic recovery, it addresses what we've seen as growing inequalities within our society that's been made obviously worse by this pandemic. So we know that lower qualified workers have made up the majority of those recently made unemployed. We know that Black, Asian and ethnic minority workers are disproportionately represented in the unemployment count. We also know that the Volterra estimate that higher skills will drive the economic recovery in West London. And so the risks that we have here, if we don't draw out targeted and specific provisions for lower skilled residents and Black and ethnic minority residents, is that we will drive an unequal recovery, which is a huge risk and challenge that I think we need to just be very clear about at this stage in terms of how we address it. And so from an Ealing point of view, it could be things like developing reskilling programs for older Asian workers who perhaps will be made redundant from the situation at Heathrow, and we'd need to identify obviously transferable skills and deliver those employability workshops and drive the activity in market and new sectors and opportunities for those people to find new jobs. Or, for instance, a highly targeted approach for supporting young Black men in Acton to engage, advise, provide assessments, mentoring, coaching, to be able to provide them with the activities that they need to get back into the jobs market for the first time at the right level. So that's where we stand as Ealing in terms of sort of feedback on the presentation that you provided, David. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Bassam. The good news is that is exactly what the conversation's all been about: is the inequality of the way the pandemic's hit, not just in the economic terms, obviously in health terms and many others, but it does show the fractures across a sort of developed global city like London and how those play out in different communities. And our job as government is to be equitable, making sure that everyone is lifted up. And if people are not getting lifted up because of specific issues, then we need specific programs. And that's what David's being charged with, as of both of David's. And we are looking at that. I mean, I think we're some way off the talk of big programs and actually getting it to do stuff on the ground in the level of efficiency we want it to do. That's really the challenge, I think. If this is even going to be a talking shop where we talk about all this stuff, or there's going to be genuine things happening on the ground, money spent, work happening, people being retrained, people being back into jobs, the economy and those households being lifted up. And that I think is a more detailed plan that David are working on. And again, it has to be very specific to the different communities. So thank you for raising that, Bassam. And I don't know if you want to come back, David or David.
Yeah, just to say, we are actively working with people on the ground. So the job entry tag support around about 3,000 people have been supported into work through that, and the work and health program again You know, that's some of the people who are even further behind that. You know, they were out of work before the pandemic was hit. So we're making sure that we don't lose a focus on those as well. And I think it is the kind of it's the interface between the FE colleges and the skills that we really need to kind of, because there are some people who with a little bit of support can kind of change sectors, and they don't really need that much reskilling. It's more about how they navigate through the system. But there are some people who are going to need longer support, either to make them kind of fit for another sector or to actually give them the skills that they need. So it's getting that balance right. But David, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just really to build on what you've said, David, and you touched on the no wrong door approach, which that sounds very systems like, but it's actually quite important, because there's an awful lot of both employment support and skills provision out there that isn't necessarily as fully accessed as it could be. And I think, speaking to Councillor Mahfouz's point, it's also around which groups access that. So building up what we do on a no wrong door approach improves access. That's not to say we don't need more provision on the ground. We absolutely do, but we also need to make sure that we can demonstrate that the system as it already is working, that an access is all it can be. So that systems piece is quite important, which we're hoping to scale over the summer with some additional funding.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are Bassam's point stands, which is that we've gone quite a long way in the generic sense. We're now looking at what do we do, and you can already see, for example, vaccine hesitancy, that different groups are resistant, and that's the same in employment. There's different groups who are harder to get to. So we do need very specialist programs. That is the next layer down, and that's something we're all very keen on if we're going to lift everybody up. So that is a body of work that needs a bit more stuff. And to tell you the truth, the idea behind the task force, which in part is similar to what we have with the Hammersmith and Fulham Industrial Strategy Board, is government can only do so much. In a mixed society, government and business are the alliance that's going to work to lift everybody up. And so bringing in all the different stakeholders, whether it's the NHS, whether it's the big corporates, whether it's small business representatives who want us to do things to help small businesses, retailers, getting those people around the table and talking about these problems as a collective does mean that we get some consensus and have a collegiate way forward. But that's a good point, and that is what we're working on. How do we reach everybody and not just focus on the big generic numbers? And that's certainly the challenge of what we're trying to do. So good point. Thank you for raising that, Bassam. And I will move on. I've got a few other people with hands up. I think it was Graham who was next. It is, yeah. Hi, Graham.
Well, thank you, Steve. Yes, in Harrow, I like the report, actually, and it's a well-researched report and gives us some very positive outlooks. I think working through COVID, the partnership arrangements of recruiting through the NHS has actually sort of shown the way about how we can move with businesses of that size to support recruitment, training and development to get them into those roles and then into more permanent roles. I think my concern I have just within Harrow itself, which does have an effect on Northwest London, is that with the large number of micro businesses that we have, and if they start failing, then it has an economic effect across the board. We also have a very low area of development. We talk about Old Oak Common. That's probably huge sites. We haven't got sites that big anymore. So we're more of people living locally, which goes back to Daniel's point around how do we support some of these micro shops, in a sense, or independent shops that are working and operating. And I'll also touch a point across the point that has just been made around inequality, I think is part of it, is how people reach out to get support. And sometimes it's been quite a challenge. So when people are getting unemployed, it's how we work with the DWP as well. And maybe we should be signposting into sort of the work that West London's doing. And to do that, I think we just need to sort of, how do we approach the government minister for London and say, look, this is what we're doing. What are you doing to help us, sort of approach? So we've got the journey mapped out. This is the what we want to do, but how do we bring them into it? And I think you've been doing some work on that already, Steve. So.
That's one of the items on the agenda, and I think we do need a sophisticated approach. I mean, government ministers would be very happy to have royal visits with us when they tell us we're all doing very well, and any party, when we're in government. The real trick is to have a proper business-like meeting where actions happen, and that is a question that we need to have answered, which we haven't quite answered yet, I don't think. But All right, let's move on to David. Over to you for the next section. I think that's a good conversation. You've got the action points. Big push on particularly making sure we take it down another level and making sure we deal with those groups particularly suffering inequalities because of the nature of diversity in our great city. Okay, next point then, a summary of progress. Is that right?
So we covered some of the progress as part of the presentation. So I think the next, if we finish this agenda item, I think the next agenda item is the film and screen.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So all right. Okay. So you did the whole thing, right? All right. Well, that's yeah. Let's do that then, David. With you again.
Yeah. Okay. So I haven't seen Bill on my. Are you here, Bill?
He's here. Yeah, I saw him.
All right. Okay. So this next presentation fits with what we're doing on the Build and Recover plan around growth sectors. The film and screen sector has been identified as a key sector for West London. We estimate that around about 100,000 people already work in that sector. I think when people think of film and screen, they may not always realise the wide variety of jobs that we're talking about. It's not just people holding a camera or people in front of a camera. It's everything from
I think people it's one of the key areas that will have global impact on because of the unique nature of our interest in our culture.
Yes.
Don't have to still speak English. So we're fully aware there's marketing jobs, accountancy jobs.
Yeah, catering, hairdressing, all the rest of it. So one of the things we know that the sector is growing. So some DCMS have done some research to say that the inward investment is going to grow from around about 2 billion in 2018 to over 4 billion in 2025, I think. And about 75% of that is in London, and a large proportion of that is in West London. And from talking to the likes of Film London and the Department for Industry and Trade, we know that actually, the likes of Netflix, Amazon, Sky, they want to do production in West London, but the limitations on that are around space. There's competition for land, not just from housing, but also for other industrial uses. And then there is the actual talent as well. So there's a skills shortages. So we've been working with West London Business, with London and Partners, with Film London, with Department for Industry and Trade, to develop some proposals as to how we can address those two barriers around skills and land. And Bill's got a presentation just to outline the work that we've been doing and proposals for how we take it forward. So I'll hand over to Bill.
Thanks very much. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair. If I can share screen, please. Can everyone see that?
We can.
So as background, I work on behalf of the Creative Enterprise Zone in West London, based in Hounslow. And part of this was a strategic decision to work on a sub-regional basis across West London because of the opportunity. Everything I'm going to talk about is covered in the paper, but I just wanted to kind of perhaps bring some things to life, like David said, that we're actually working on. Again, just to summarize, it is an industry that has grown even during the pandemic, and the numbers showing that during the last quarter, it actually reached the spend in the UK that it had achieved pre-pandemic. And obviously, just intuitively, what the pandemic has showed is that they need more content, and that confluence of, in addition to the big features, the BBC and ITV shows, it's the streamings of the Netflix, the Amazons, Disney Pluses, and others that has just increased the demand and thus the opportunity. It's important to remember also that, as our chair said, that West London is already an important film cluster. It's got your major studios, it's got the connectivity with Heathrow, obviously, the international players from Sky to Disney. We've got about 500,000 square feet in stage space spread across the 7 boroughs, and it increases to over 1.5 million if you include Pinewood and Elstree and Leavesden just across the border. It's important also to recognize that each of the boroughs is actually in the film business. This chart just shows some of the productions that have been filmed in the last few years across West London, and the chart on the right just demonstrates the range within the screen industry, from the feature films to TV dramas to factual. Also, just in terms of direct income, this is just from the location fees. So these are for shots on the streets or in parks or in quote unquote outside of the studio, where the production companies pay a location fee. And over the last 5 years, the 7 boroughs have gotten about 45 million from that. So again, it's both an economic as well as the employment and strategy that we're trying to address. For our effort, what we decided to do is work on 4 areas. 1, increasing studio space. 2, increasing the skills and providing job opportunities for our local residents to get into the industry. 3, promoting a network and innovation amongst our local businesses, our HEs and our incubators. And number 4, and importantly, promoting sustainability within the industry. Again, much of this is captured in the paper, so just to give you some highlights, the one thing that we're doing is trying to work with all the important stakeholders across West London to make sure that they are engaged and participating and get buy-in, and more importantly, help set the direction of what we need to do. Just very quickly for space, we brought together a roundtable recently that included David, might have included some of the people on the call. If you look to the right, you can see the different ranges of perspectives that were there. And I believe the summary points from the meeting are summarized in the paper, but it essentially lays out our to-do list. For brevity, I'll move on, but the points are in the paper and we can discuss. One of the main things that's trying to increase space is looking for temporary space. West London, as we know, does not have the big sites to do another Pinewood. Our opportunities are in looking at some of the smaller sites and even some of the temporary being that it might be part of a long-term development, but perhaps for the next 3 to 4 to 5 years, there might be an opportunity to use the site for filming before it takes over for residential or something else. And also, we should really be proud. We are having new studios open. Garden Studios just opened in Park Royal, and it is a virtual production studio, and it's got quite a lot of attention. And again, while we're struggling to increase space, we should be proud of the cluster that we have. Skills, obviously, everything that has been discussed today ties into this discussion. Similarly, we gathered, if you look to the right, a range of players and people in the industry to help define what we need to do to get more people engaged. And that led to a series of follow-up actions, which we are working on. Again, they are summarized in the paper.
Oh, it's 7 million then.
So, just also very briefly, we are working with the HEs and the FEs, trying to get a handle on what is the actual training we have across West London. So this is a collaboration that's being led through the working group set up by the vice chancellors and with support from Middlesex University. Also working with David and Andrew to work with the DWP to see how we can replicate the program that was targeted toward aviation workers who had been made redundant or put on furlough, and getting them into the screen industry. As David mentioned, there's been a lot of transferable skills that are able to apply, whether you've worked in finance to be able to move to a production accountant, or worked in property, being able to go to a state manager and so forth. Very quickly, finally, through innovation, we're working with Upstream to promote a digital creative network that tries to bring together the SMEs, the entrepreneurs, our HEs, and everyone who's working to promote the innovation that is really driving the industry at the moment. If you bear with me, there's a short film which features some of our West London businesses. Can you hear that? Can you hear that?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll send a link around, but it's a nice little film that has.
It might just be just be a glitch. I've played a lot of these things in the past, and they either work or don't work. But give it another shot. I saw Prima from our Upstream program pop up, so
yeah,
here's what she's got to say. No, not going to work, is it? All right. Well, we tried.
So it was always a risk to do a film in a presentation about film and screen, wasn't it? So
yeah. There. Thank you for pointing that out, David. Just when Bill. Just... All right, Bill. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah. Hang on a sec.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, just to conclude anyway, but I'll send a video link or can put it in the chat. But the idea that, we're working on skills, space, innovation, and sustainability. We've gotten a lot of support in that. Everyone recognizes that historically we've been such a strong player in industry, but it's all happened organically. And we now have a real opportunity to collaborate and bring together the players to ensure that West London can remain and even become the premier destination. The industry wants to get here. It's an open door. It's a very nice problem to have in that we have an industry that's growing. It's a moving train. Our job is to figure out how do we latch on to take advantage of it.
Okay, well, that is very good, and it certainly fits with our thinking. I mean, just if you consider how an economic ecosystem grows, it grows because of a natural talent in an area. And you look across West London, we had the BBC for a long time. We had Pinewood, we had Ealing Studios, and our infrastructure and include everything from trees to motorways and train stations is about 100 years ahead of East and Southeast London. So we have huge advantages. You add in Heathrow, which makes us a destination hub, and we're sort of in the Goldilocks zone between the city and Heathrow. So we should be able to attract those types of businesses in, and with that type of heritage. And certainly the work you're doing, Bill and David, will give it the right nudge. And having Disney in my own borough, we've got Disney, UK TV, and we've just managed to encourage ITV to move here. So there is a growing heritage of media companies and a long, strong heritage of art. Everything from the Sex Pistols, the Who, the Clash, all came out of West London. So there's something we can capture there and think about how we want to shape the future. And our job in government is to nudge and work with partners. And that's certainly some of our approach. So can I just take a few comments, any politicians first? And David, you got your hand up. Do you want to come and cap something off, did you? Come on in. Yeah. Well, just politicians, you want to come in afterwards. David, do you want to just add something?
Yeah, all I was going to say is thanks, Bill, for that presentation. And the opportunity around skills is both like an opportunity now, and it's also about the pipeline as well. So it's a twinned opportunity. So, and it really fits with what we're doing in terms of our build and recover plan as being a key growth sector. So it's an example of how we're engaging with a particular industry. So with Bill and others, we've been working with all the boroughs to kind of make sure that we take advantage of those short-term opportunities, but also the longer-term ones as well.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I've got Mohammed next, who is, I think you're still chair of the Borough of Culture, aren't you, Mohammed?
Just about.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just going to say, actually, I mean the Garden Studios that's come to Waxlow Road in Harlesden. I went there with my cabinet lead just to take a look, and honestly, I have to admit I was totally blown away at the amount of space that they've put back into use, and one of the things, right, that they are doing is working to get apprenticeships into place and to make sure employment opportunities are there, and we're looking to hopefully get Brenton Works to work with them and sort of hopefully increase the opportunities, and hopefully the WLA can sort of link in with them as well, and to create the opportunities across West London. I think I didn't realise the opportunities that were available when with the screens and everything, and all these secondary sort of parts that are associated with it. I think we need to make sure we can actually build upon this and sort of create West London as a hub for film and TV. It's the opportunities are there, and when you take a look at the some of the filming that has taken place right across our respective boroughs. There's a vast opportunity, I think, and people are crying out for the space, and we do have a lot of the expertise here. We just need to bring it all together and target it in the right way. Thank you.
Very good point. Very good point. Right, Graham.
Yes, thank you, Bill. It was a very good presentation. We brought in a filming policy as local government does a few years ago to enable this sort of work to take place, relationships to take place with the film industry, working on the streets and in our buildings, and it's worked exceptionally well. Yeah. They even repaired one of our buildings for us. They left it in a better state than when they used it. I just wondered, from your point, from your position, is there anything that we could do collectively to have that sort of common approach across councils, so we get some sort of way of working sorted through? We have ours approach through one individual who then coordinates across the council, although in some areas I think different parts of the council get involved. I just wondered if it's which is the easiest way. And I do like the way the industry as well takes on a lot of apprenticeships. We've had quite a few move into the film industry level, supported by the film crews that have come through working in Harrow. So long may it continue. And my final point is, we've got a very old civic centre that won a Brutalist of the Year award for the use of concrete, and we want to knock it down. But if the Star Wars group want to blow it up for any reason, we wouldn't mind.
Okay, great. Right. Over to you, Bill.
Yes, thank you. I think there are a couple of areas for collective collaboration, and I think I will let David and WLA come back in terms of articulating them formally, but I would say in terms of areas, one, I think there are a couple of policy areas that each of your collective planning and regeneration teams are trying to address as we unlock space. Secondly, I would say for skills, I think there is, as we learn that working with DWP does often require political support, and we getting this leveling up agenda thrown in our face, I think the collaboration of the collective West London political support, making the case for support, could be the right ask at the right time as well. But again, I think David are in a better position to shape how we make those asks happen and when we do. But there is a lot of value to be working at. Finally, I would say that yes, we do need space. If I'm working with many of your teams, but if you wanted me to talk to someone, if you've got old buildings, old warehouses, long-term development projects that are going to take 20 years but may not be used, please let's find whatever. We can use spaces for up to 5 years where they can build a shell, or they can use it for 18 months if it's an existing building. So there's plenty of opportunity if we can find it and unlock it.
Yeah, I think some good points there. I mean, can I just make a philosophical point first? I don't think we should ever talk about ask the government. It's very child adult. I much prefer to make an offer, because that's how it works in business, which is where I've always worked. You make offers to people and they like them or they don't like them. But normally an offer is of benefit to them as much as it is to us. So I think we should do that. I've got a few ideas to come back on, but I can see Daniel wants to come in at this point, so I'll call Daniel.
Thank you. Not so much about sort of supporting the industry as it were, but it does support the industry in the long term. But it's more about jobs for students. So we have, certainly in our borough, no doubt in yours, you've got sort of performing arts colleges and things like that. And it's when they graduate, when they finish their course, What's the, they probably do have a relationship with the studios. I don't know, but it would be good, given where our location is. I would like to think that our students in that sector have already got a foot through the door, whether it be placements or apprenticeships or that kind of thing. Because it is, once they graduate, it is quite, I believe it is quite a highly competitive industry to get into, even as a runner. And things like that. So look, it was just more that, it's more about the long term in terms of youth unemployment as well, and not just about the economic benefits that extra filming can do. It's to try and get our young people in as well.
Yeah, some good points. How do we get people? Have you got any famous institutions there for training? We've got Lambda, and we're just getting the Brit School.
No, I wouldn't say famous, but we've got Barnet Southgate College, we've got Middlesex University, and within that there are sort of media studies and that kind of thing throughout. We've got some dance school as well, and of course at the West End on our doorstep in a way. But yeah, it was just to look at it from that angle, not just sort of us being a sort of film set. And I know that I've oversimplified it by saying that, but if we can try and get young people in. Yeah, they're very well located, and what that industry relies on is it needs reliability, and people who live here, arguably, will turn up. It's easy for them to turn up and to get into these jobs.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Right, Bill.
Just briefly to respond, you're absolutely right, and one of the things we're trying to do is make connections. So, for example, I introduced Lambda to the Met School. And the Met School has got a relationship with Garden Studios. So again, it's just making connections that sort of people can meet and interact. And that's, I think, an important part of what we're trying to do. The other, for example, is Lambda needed some help with some space. So introduced them to David Warren from West London College, who was able to sort of help them out with some sort of location filming. So a lot of it is just connecting people up so they can start to find where they can collaborate as well.
Yeah, I think philosophically, there's only so much government can do. So what our job is to recognise there's an ecosystem here. As you said, Daniel, some of it's on our doorstep in the West End, some of it's actually here in West London. And the question is, what can we do to nurture it? We came into office, just as an anecdote, in 2014 with the view that we want to be the best borough for business in the European Union, and couldn't get an officer to write what that looked like. Our cabinet member for economics is a professor of economic geography, so he'd flown around the world looking at these ecosystems and had some ideas. So in the end, we asked this guy, Greg Jackson, to be our business commissioner, who was setting up a company called Octopus Energy at the time, which is now turning over £1 billion and is one of the fastest growing companies in the country. So as well as doing that, he then wrote certain rules, which was just very plainly obvious when you pointed them out about what we can do to put the infrastructure in. The first one is entrepreneurs starting out will always want cheap, affordable, flexible office space, and they will go wherever it is. Whether it's London Bridge as it was, or whether it used to be Soho 30, 40 years ago, when it went to Old Street. He said, why don't you tie that into your plans? But you actually say, we're going to set aside some stuff for affordable, flexible office space for entrepreneurs. So we've done that. We could do that for film industry. If we did get another Pinewood Studios, that would be very good in any of our boroughs. We could say we will set aside land for film industry and work with the planners to see how we could do that across West London. So that could be something we could do. And then in terms of just connecting the schools up, with the businesses, with the entrepreneurs, with everything else that works, it is a case of sort of creating opportunities for networking, I think. Some of them formal, some of them less so, but it's trying to create that sort of a place where people can just step into that world quite easily and get picked up. So I think there's a paper potentially to be written on, because if we're going to look at how do we build that better as we come out of this, what stage, the stage the economy's in now, and we look at the challenges of COVID and Brexit, you can say, well, actually, British culture being exported around the world is one of the great things about our economy. It's where all our young people want to work. It's a very exciting part of what we do, whether it's music, film, or even video games. You look at what they've done in Dundee with video games, you can see that councils can play a part. So I think it might be good having a paper specifically looks at the type of things we can do, from the things Graham talked about, such as making it easy for people to film on our streets, to to actually looking at some of the things like setting land aside for filming studios and all sorts of other things that would make this even stronger in that market sector. So I don't know if you'd be happy to do that paper with David, but I think that would be quite good, and maybe we could get some of the people from the task force to build into it who are in that sector. And we have got amazing people in West London from Sky TV, UK TV, Endemol, Disney, ITV, BBC. It goes on and on and on. Having the BBC and Disney, biggest, some of the biggest media companies in the world, is a major asset to us in West London. So we should try and see what we do to help that grow and to create more of the types of opportunities that Daniel was talking about. Can you bring another paper forward along those lines, David? Yeah, something we might do. Just this was what we could do to try.
I was saying yes, we can draw that together.
Sorry, one question.
Yeah, just download it, right? The NHS app.
All right, hold on. I've got someone else coming.
Sorry.
Is that you, Mohammed, talking?
Apologies.
No, right. Anybody else want to come in on the subject before we move off? Right, Bill.
Yeah, the final thing I just want to add is I think, and thank you very much for today, but the important thing I want to point out is that this is something we can also be proud of now as we dress up. And if you think about what West London can be known for, we have the history, everything from the African Queen to Star Wars and everything else. And again, it's the way the supply chain connects. But the idea of promoting West London and holding our head up and shouting about this is who we are is something that we really should be looking at as well. Because again, we've got international interests and inward investors looking to come to spend their money in West London because of the talent and everything else that we offer.
Yeah, and I think all of us would love a film studio in our borough, whether it's in Barnet, Ealing, Hammersmith and Fulham, or wherever, the ODPC area. There's plenty of places where we could find some of these things to build. And if it creates jobs and wealth, then that's a good thing. So, okay, well, if you could do a paper on that, David Francis, is there a consensus on that? Does anyone disagree that we want to look at that, or everyone happy to back that? Okay, well, that's something we'll take forward. Look at how we prompt the marketplace, as it were. Okay, I think almost there. We've got if there's nothing else on this, all I can do is thank you, Bill, for your insights and work and passion. All great stuff. So thanks very much. We will, in terms of any other business, I don't think there is anything. Does anyone have anything pressing they want to raise that we can do as West London leaders for the people of this amazing part of our city to make it better economically? Any other points? Anything you'd like, and any future agendas? No? All right, well, look, let me thank you all for your attention and participation, and wish you a safe and happy time until the next meeting. All the best, and thanks again.
Jeff,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.